Hey everyone, welcome to the Senior Rehab Project, the podcast for the community of rehab clinicians working to advance care for older adults. I'm Nicole Nexon, your host, and this is the State of the Sniff. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the 2019 Skilled Nursing Facility Prospective Payment System Final Rule.
Ooh.
I know what you're all thinking. Like, this is some sexy stuff. So, joining me today, I again have my friends Christina.
Hi.
And Katie.
Hi.
So we got PT, OT, and speech, all of us here together, talking about the trifecta. Talking about what it's going to look like working in a SNF. Try to get you guys some facts, maybe get a little discussion started, and we'll go from there. So, where do we begin? The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, from here on CMS, have released their final rule on the Skilled Nursing Facility Prospective Payment System, also known as SNF PPS. So this updates payment rates, quality reporting requirements, and value-based purchasing. This replaces the existing class mix classification, which is the Resource Utilization Group, version 4, the RUG, with a revised case mix methodology called the Patient-Driven Payment Model, known from here on as PDPM. So this PDPM is going to begin the fiscal year of 2020. RUG will continue for the fiscal year of 2019, which runs October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019. So We're talking fiscal year and not actual year.
That confused me just now. Thanks for clearing that up, Nicole. I'm already learning facts.
You're welcome. Sounded good. All right, so some basics. The number one thing that I think we're all kind of seeing is that this will shift payment away from service provision. So that's our RUGs, our therapy minutes, to resident characteristics. So everyone is going to end up in a kind of payment plan based on a few different things. There's 5 case mix components. There's physical therapy component, occupational therapy component, speech language pathology component, and then there's the nursing and the non-therapy ancillary services components. Every SNF resident will be assigned based on this. So that's where we're starting. Katie, actually, one of the first things I noticed when we started looking at these things, the RUG focuses on ADLs and it tracks functional dependence as it is now, whereas this seems to be like a shift towards independence. So your higher scores are actually for people who are doing better. Did you have any thoughts about what's going on from an OT perspective or any AOTA statements? Anything you wanted to discuss?
The initial concern was that the way that they were measuring functional independence for ADLs wasn't necessarily valid and reliable, which I'm not quite sure it is. It measures independence in terms of feeding, oral hygiene, toilet hygiene, and toilet transfers, which doesn't necessarily paint the whole picture in terms of their self-care.
Yeah, everyone's going to have to walk around nude.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no dressing.
And even even at its most basic, are you going to be recommending that your patients are walking around the house without their shoes on? Like, if they can't put their shoes on or put their proper footwear on, does it even matter if they can perform their toilet hygiene? Because what's going to happen on their way there? What if they step on something, they're diabetic, they can't feel it, they get injured? Like, I don't think it necessarily encompasses everything we would want to see in order to consider somebody functionally independent.
Do you think they're looking at toilet hygiene as encompassing dressing and bathing and kind of everything in the bathroom instead of like the smaller scope of like just actually using the potty?
It's possible they are, but I don't agree that it encompasses, I would say, dressing tasks from above the knees up, which completely, what about your feet?
Okay, so you're missing that. You know how much I love feet, so
yes,
I totally understand your concern.
That was for you.
Took you 5 minutes to bring that up.
And I play in mouths all day.
They did AOTA did some sort of research suggesting that it is valid and reliable in terms of measuring functional independence. I am not 100% convinced from what I see day to day that that's an effective way to measure those things.
So you're saying you see people who are good getting on and off the toilet, juggling themselves there, but getting dressed is...
Or getting washed, or getting in and out of the shower, or getting yourself a cup
There's
of
so much
water.
water.
Like, there's
Okay.
so... It's one thing to be able to feed yourself and brush your teeth, that's great, but how do you get the food to your mouth?
Okay. I see what you're saying. Alright. So one thing I was excited about is that we are no longer going to have to answer this question called, does the resident walk? So for right now, I have this thing I'm filling out, and it says, does the resident walk? Does the resident walk 50 feet with 2 turns? Does the resident walk 150 feet? And let me tell you, on eval, there's a lot of people who walk but are not hitting 50 feet.
Right.
So I'm actually kind of excited because we're getting a new code. We PTs are getting a new code, walk 10 feet instead of does the resident walk. So, all right, sometimes I get people who can't walk 10 feet, but 10 feet is like a great...
much more reasonable
Yes,
number.
much more reasonable.
Manageable.
And then if they cannot walk, my choices will be resident refused, not applicable, not attempted due to environmental limitations, which I'm
What does that
really
mean?
excited about. So anything external to the patient, like maybe there's something they can't do because of reasons external to them. And then there's not attempted due to medical condition or safety concerns. So that's anything internal to the patient.
Okay, I understand.
So I'm actually really excited about that split there, because sometimes a lot of people who can't walk for environmental reasons, it sounds really weird, but I actually have seen it happen. It does tend to be the people who have longer distances to walk, like they can't walk 50 feet because they're stuck in their room on isolation precautions.
Right.
So I'm hoping that will stay, because then my patients can't walk 50 feet. I can say it was not attempted due to environmental limitations, as unlike now I have to say medical condition and then clarify under. So I'm really excited about those 2 new additions there.
More nuance.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like where Katie is saying she lost the nuance, we gained some.
You found it.
I think
found
speech
it.
is, from what I've read so far, I get the sense that speech has gained some nuance as well. I have felt like in the past it's sort of been like, is the patient on speech, yes or no? Whereas now it's sort of been acknowledged as a therapy discipline that exists.
Yeah.
And it will be really interesting to, I think that will probably lend to some increased reporting responsibility that has to happen to speech that we've sort of dodged thus far under the RUG system, and that's going to come, with some costs and some benefits. But it will be interesting to see how the case mix situation works out, and how we're going to have to tie that in with nursing, their documentation.
Okay, yeah, because you guys kind of bump into nursing quite a bit, I think. I
We
think
bump
more
a
than
little
any
bit
discipline,
with-
you guys
yeah.
probably bump in more.
Our patients tend to be more medically complex.
Yes, true.
That's
So
why.
it looks like you have an acute neurologic category, a non-neurologic category, and those are like your big umbrellas.
It's sort of like stroke and everyone else.
Yeah, and then you have like swallowing disorder, mechanically altered diet, and then cognitive impairment is a whole other thing.
And then other speech characteristics or other speech areas, I forget exactly how they term it.
SLP related comorbidity.
Related comorbidity, there you go. So that's gonna be where the areas like voice, receptive or expressive language, TBI, are captured. I did think it was kind of weird because when I skimmed through the 400-page final rule, which is the thing that I actually did, they sort of oddly isolated out ALS, which I found very interesting because I see a lot more multiple sclerosis and a lot more Parkinson's. A lot of Parkinson's. And I just found it really interesting how ALS was sort of awarded its own special category. It really leads me to wonder, like, well, how do I classify my Parkinson's people? Do they only get tossed in with, like, voice disorders? It's like, well, that's not the same as folks who have something that would actually be relatively simple, like a post-extubation, edema that might lead to a voice problem, but maybe you don't know right away whether it is going to go away on its own or if they have something underlying, and you have to spend the time and the resources investigating that. Those people who have a comorbid dysphagia along with their voice issue, and I don't know, I just think that those populations that we see a little bit more of that are neurologically based, but not acute, haven't really been captured. And I don't know, I have like 4 people with Parkinson's on my caseload at this very moment. There's a lot. So.
And are they going to get kind of, not swept under the rug, but for lack of better words, are they going to get less services because they don't have these additional like diagnoses or comorbidities that are higher up on the list? Because they are super time intensive therapy-wise. I mean,
High LSVT.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You have your LSVT.
Yeah.
So there's going to be 16 case mix groups to classify residents for PT and OT payments. All residents will be classified into one and only one of these groups for each of the 12 components. So.
And it's going to be the same case mix assignment for PT and OT, right?
You're going to get one for each, but we have like a very similar.
Oh, okay. Rubric. Okay.
Yeah. So now speech is going to have, you have 12 case mix groups,
Yep.
and everyone's going to end up in one of those. The NTA, the non-therapy ancillary services, they have 6 case mix groups, and you get into one of those. And this is from the APTA, and I'm trying to see what they say about nursing.
The nurses seem like they're going to have a lot more documenting to do than they have now.
Yeah. The current SNF PPS strongly incentivizes the provision of therapy, and we're going to shift towards residents with more complex clinical needs. So they're saying that higher relative payments are going to go to IV medications, people with end-stage renal disease, diabetes, wound infections, amputation, prosthetic care, who have longer prior inpatient stays. So this might play out well for, some of our more medically complex people also,
The
Well,
repeat offenders, I feel like that's kind of...
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the repeat
I think it does, though, disincentivize giving therapy to people who aren't benefiting from it anymore, or maybe people who are still in a position where they need to be receiving complex nursing care that cannot be provided in the home, but maybe they are ambulating, or maybe they're just not going to be functional ambulators and they have been wheelchair level for a while and that's it. It allows them to receive the services that they need in a setting that is going to meet them versus shoving those people into the community.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll take some of the pressure off the therapists to kind of
be really creative in their goal setting.
The
big concern was that patients wouldn't, there are there are possibly not enough safeguards to ensure that patients will be getting the amount of therapy necessary to allow the attempt to progress or to achieve these functional goals.
Okay. So.
Like now we have the rugs and it's like, okay, X amount of minutes should get you to your goal, but what is going to hold us to like, we need to make sure this patient gets this much therapy in order to show this functional progress?
Well, I think that does, it shifts the responsibility to the rehab director and the therapist to provide the patient with the daily time that will meet that need. But it makes me concerned that maybe some less scrupulous rehab directors, we know they're out there, we're glad we don't have one, but we've had patients share horror stories with us from other places in the world. And I'd be concerned that, that exact patient that you're talking about maybe would only get 30 minutes of occupational therapy a day, and, there's nothing that requires documentation that they can put their pants on.
Yeah.
So they go home unable to put pants on.
So you're saying, what you're saying.
But they can brush their teeth.
So
They can't make a sandwich, but they can brush their teeth.
after eating said sandwich
But
that
they'll
they
be able
cannot
to
make.
swallow it because at least speech therapy. I'll have to teach them how to put their pants on. Oh God, this is terrible.
Someone's gonna have to do it.
Oh no.
Another concern brought up by AOTA was that there's not necessarily recognition of how cognition and other comorbidities impact their performance, especially in terms of like the amount of time it takes to provide services for a patient, and along the lines of also in terms of like cognition impacting like ADLs or IADLs. Does the system necessarily reflect that or take that into account when providing services?
Well, and those patients need a lot more repetition.
A lot of repetition.
And that requires time.
Yeah. And will they necessarily get it, especially if they don't have these certain diagnoses?
So I'm actually hearing you guys say that this is a great opportunity for therapists to exercise their clinical judgment skills and really fight for what their patients need and be vocal in the skills that they can deliver.
So how are we going to do that, Nicole?
Oh, we're going to do that by making sure that ourselves and our colleagues are up to date with evidence-based practice, and we are going to talk amongst ourselves about what our patients need and the best way to present that to directors of rehab who may not understand why these things are critical. I think it's going to take therapists to have a bit more
chutzpah.
You gotta take the power back.
Yeah, we're going to have some more chutzpah. We're going to have to take the power back and be like, this is what my patients need.
This is the number of minutes. It's not 60 minutes
Like
every
sometimes
day.
my patients need like 43 to like 57 minutes. You know, it is what it is. And I think it's a good opportunity. I think it sounds scary as all hell, especially if you're new. Like if I was new and someone was like, oh, you have to talk to your boss about the things that you think and maybe confront them a little bit. I'd be like, oh my God, no.
Well, you know
I'm
what,
also spoiled. We have Sue. We're like, Sue, the patients need this. And she's like, yes, use your judgment. We're like, thank you, Sue.
We are definitely very lucky humans. I also, though, in defense of new grads, I do think that students and new grads come to therapy sessions still with that, we call it lesson planning in speech. I don't know what you guys call it in grad school, but a session plan, lesson plan. Still kind of jolt into their head. All right, well, we're going to budget 15 minutes for X. We're going to budget 15 minutes for Y. We're going to do a warm-up for so many minutes. We're going to spend 5 minutes wrapping it all up. And look, altogether, I'm going to need 40 minutes with this patient. And I do think that students come from a position where they still have that sort of beat into their head, at least in the speech world. I don't know about y'all.
Okay, see, I thought you were going to say come out of school with that whole, like, we're going to change the world attitude.
Oh, no.
I know, like, that's how I came out of school. And I know, like, a lot of PTs come out of school, like, I'm going to change the world. And then, you know, a couple years later, you're like, all right, I'm going to help people who don't yell at me.
I'm going to help people who
And I don't mean to sound, like, weary and beaten down, because, like, you guys know that I'm very optimistic overall. But it's like...
See, I went to school in New York City, so I still have that, like, make a plan, be efficient, go, like, New York City attitude in my head, and maybe I project that onto students a little bit more than I should, but I think that I also model that for students. And thinking about the new grads that I've worked with, in speech, we tend to spend a lot of time in grad schools from what I've experienced myself and what I've observed in other people doing treatment plans, and maybe that does make us a pretty decent resource for PT and OT in order to kind of help them advocate for time in a way that they haven't had to do before. And ultimately, it does all come back to the research. It comes back to the idea of having a target number of repetitions in your head, figuring out how long it's going to take to get through those verbal activities or written activities or swallowing exercises or walking or, trials or how long you can budget for an ADL or something like that. I definitely think we're equipped to do it. It's going to happen. It's definitely going to be an adjustment period. And to be completely frank, I think when this ultimately comes out, the thing that we're going to be freaking out about the most is going to be more so shifts that have to get made in actual documentation. Because Just because whenever there's a shift in actual documentation, it's always like, how do I get this foreign language in my fingertips so that way it can pour out onto the keyboard when I need it to, when I have 5 spare minutes. And I think that that's honestly, at least, I don't know. I think that we're freaking out about a lot now. I'm not freaking out, but just thinking about a lot now.
We overanalyze.
Push comes to shove,
we're therapists.
Yeah.
We overanalyze. Like across
all realms of life.
Yeah. Just PT's OT speech. We all overanalyze things, and it's what we do. We need to have all the answers, and we have a million questions, and it's just personality.
So use your organizing skills, people, in your research, right?
Organizing skills.
Ugh.
We have those?
Yes.
I mean, yes, of course we have
I
those.
think it's a spectrum going from the most organized to the least.
So,
And I'll have you guys know that she said most organized, and she pointed to Christina, and then she swept around herself,
Right in the middle.
right in the middle, to me at the least organized. And because I like to just roll into a session and be like, I have a game plan, but I'm not so firmly tied to my game plan. If I see something else happening, I'm going to go with it. Like, if I think we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we start X, and I'm like, you know what? A and F would be better. Like,
See-
I will go to A and F. Like, I'm
She will sprint to A and F.
and I
am dropping Y and,
and the
Z. like,
difference
hot
and how you
potatoes.
become organized is that I notice A and F, and then I make a plan in my head to do the following session, and then I have my following session planned.
I feel like, why
in
waste
my
the time?
brain.
Why waste the time on Y and Z if it's not where I want to go?
Because
at
you
this point?
thought about Y and Z for a reason in the first place.
Yeah, but they might be not so important right now.
So
we
In the
can
face
argue
of
about
things.
this all day.
Best laid intentions, and then
Right?
you're like, nope. Oh no. Oh no. Reassess.
Yeah.
See, I'm like a ritual person. It all comes down to like the ritual and the rhythm and the flow. I wanted to ask a question since we're sitting here, and since I was digging at Asha earlier, I want to know how you guys think your professional organizations have been communicating with you in order to start the discussion.
I
About
feel
this
like the APTA has been talking about this for a while, and I'm holding a 24-page packet in one hand and a 13-page packet in the other hand, put together by the APTA, and I feel pretty good about it, to be honest.
And they'll give you more.
Too.
And they'll give us more. I know they will.
And I know AOTA was doing a lot of communicating with CMS when the first, not the final version, when the first version came out in terms of expressing their concerns about X, Y, and Z, about how this is going to impact patient care, which is ultimately the goal, quality patient care.
See, and that's the thing that I'm sort of pick on Asha about is I know that they have evidence base at the center of everything. I know that they have been involved in the rulemaking revision process, and we're very involved in the shifts that were made with the speech case mix group and all that type of stuff. And I know that because I read that 400-page document, skimmed, and kind of saw the CMS concerns and responses to all of it, and I know they were involved. The thing that I hope will happen more is that information will get disseminated, because I have 2 pages in front of me right now that don't really say much, and the 2 pages I have basically just say, CMS is changing things. This is what PDPM is. It's happening. It's going to happen in October 2019. Get ready. So I look forward to the receipt of more information, and I'm also a little concerned that we're going to have to wing it a little bit. We'll see what comes out at Asha. Asha's in the fall.
Maybe they're kind of like parceling it out. They're like, here's a little tidbit here, digest this, don't freak out. Because I know...
They love to take their time.
Well, here's the thing. I know with the original change to PPS, what I've heard from the therapists, the older therapists, is that there was a lot of panic when PPS came out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people who didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of people losing their jobs because companies just didn't know what was going to happen. And then it came in, it wasn't as bad as everyone thought. People stopped freaking out, and we went back to normal. And I think...
This is the way it's going to be forever.
It's never going to be like anything forever. But it's always
No.
gonna
I mean
change.
the cycle.
Oh,
the cycle will continue.
Right? The cycle's going to continue. There's always going to be change. Change isn't necessarily bad.
Right.
We just have to roll with it. And I think maybe they've learned some lessons from that PPS
Yes.
input in like the beginning. And now our professional organizations and the companies are like, let's parcel this out, let's keep people from freaking out, and let's just see what happens, and like let's get a good grip on it, because
I hope so.
this doesn't start until what, October 2019?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have time. Like, we have a year to learn, to sort it out, to figure out how it's going to work. And I think that companies who are really going to go places and work are going to start already. And I think therapists across disciplines who are going to make this work are going to make this work. Like, they're not going to be afraid of change. We're going to see it, we're going to face it, and we're going to just keep rolling, because that's what we have to do in life. Like,
It'll
you just,
keep us an extra 10 minutes to get those words in our fingertips, and eventually they'll
and
spill
eventually
out
just
and we'll
flow.
be good.
And then one day we'll be like, I remember when we made the shift to, what are they calling this? PDPM.
That's my DJ
And
name.
everybody was PDPM.
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
It's not dirty. That's not what I was
And-
implying. Cut that out.
Everybody, they're gonna be like, I remember we were all freaking out. It's gonna be like, you know, when it became the year 2000 and everyone felt like,
That's what you were gonna say.
and everyone thought like the world was gonna end and the clocks were gonna stop, and
None
we
of that
just
happens.
yelled Happy New Year with my friends, and then we just continued our party and life went on. Like, we woke up the next morning and there was just some zeros instead of the 99.
Nice.
Whoa.
And it wasn't that big of a deal. And I think that we can all be rational, and this isn't going to be that big of a
It
deal.
can work to our advantage.
Yeah.
I think that 100% it can work to our advantage.
I agree.
If we accept it as such and kind of
So don't freak out, guys.
I think it's also another big
Don't freak out.
opportunity for
Educate.
interdepartmental, for educating yourself, educating your colleagues who don't know as much about rehab, and to learn yourself if you don't know as much about nursing and what they do, because nursing is definitely downplayed in the current payment model, and it seems like in the upcoming payment model that's going to shift dramatically, and I think it's an opportunity for everybody to step their game up. That's good.
So speaking of stepping up game, the one other thing I wanted to cover was the rates of payment for things and the rates, how that's going to work.
Not a thing I understand very much about.
Right. So, all right, as of right now, we know that, like, as a general rule of thumb, Medicare covers for 20 days at 100%,
100%.
and then you go into the next 80 days, and you have your other coverages. So,
80-20.
I don't know what's going to go on there. They'll figure it out. I don't know how that's going to work. But what I know is that as of right now, the adjustment factor for PT and OT components is 1 for days 1 to 20. So the same thing, days 1 to 20 are the most highly incentivized, and we know that a lot of things happen between days 1 and usually 21 is generally where you have a lot of changes occurring in, I would say, the bulk of our patients. Not everybody. There's some
Vast
people with
majority, yeah.
much more complex issues that stay longer.
Take way longer.
Yeah. Payment will decline 2% every 7 days for days 21 to 97, and will be at a factor of 0.76 for days 98 to 100. But I said, like, to step up our game, like, okay, so now we're looking at stays that are, you know, we're going to feel some push for a 20-day stay, right? Even if you didn't before. But that's very clinically possible if you look at all the research. From like 8 out of 10 patients, a 20-day stay is perfectly acceptable if everybody is operating at the highest level of care that they can.
If they're getting the right amount of therapy. And
Right.
the
If you're doing your job properly, if you're using evidence-based, techniques, and you're, working your patient for that if you're doing active, good therapy for that 60 minutes, then your patient's going to benefit. That's how it already stands now. So, again, I feel like, yes, there are some instances, like the AOTA was saying, where people who do have higher medical needs, say like your CVAs or your Parkinson's or your, things like that. But hopefully that's where the nursing case mix will pick up, or the non-therapy ancillary services will pick up, and that will get those people through, because their rate is different their rate for the NTA, their adjustment factor is 3 for days 1 to 3. And then it's at 1 for all subsequent days.
Mm-hmm.
So they start off real high, and then they drop to a rate that we begin at.
Mm-hmm.
So again, hopefully these are the people that are gonna still, it's not gonna be like pushed out because nursing care is still gonna be in there. So I'm hoping that we'll see that balance out, but I am hoping that we'll see a rise in therapists being more clinically proactive, more educationally proactive, and really just doing everything they can to like make this feasible, but also not being afraid and like kind of taking it on ourselves to really do our best job and get our best outcomes
It's gonna be
efficiently.
what we make of it.
Yeah, I agree.
We can do it.
Yeah. Go team.
Go team.
We want to say thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Project. If you've gained anything from this episode, please consider supporting our work, or continue supporting our work, either way. You can become a patron through Patreon, a service that allows people like you to support people like us. You can give as little as $1 a month or become a game changer for $8.99 a month, where you'll get a redefined old mug and access to our monthly meetups. You're going to want to go to seniorrehabproject.com to learn more and find the show notes for this episode. You will definitely hear from me soon, and don't forget to stay funky.